17th, 1954 was actually the year that the Supreme Court ruled on the Brown versus Board of Education case. And in that ruling, the Supreme Court ruled that separating children based on their race was unconstitutional. Despite the 1954 and 1955 Supreme Court ruling on desegregation, Muskogee County schools did not desegregate or did not begin to desegregate their schools until 1963. During that year, there was an agreement signed that said that they would begin to desegregate schools one grade at a time, year after year. But this actually would turn into a 30-year tug-of-war legal battle that would not end between those who were for desegregation and those who were against desegregation. It would not end until 1997, 2 years before I graduated high school. The first time I realized that my skin was different was the moment that I entered 3rd grade. That's the year that Muskogee County, which is based in Columbus, Georgia, decided to do what's known as busing.
Racial integration busing in the United States, also known as busing, was the practice of assigning and transporting students to schools within or outside their local school districts in an effort to diversify the racial makeup of schools.
I remember my mom not understanding why we got a letter that year from the Department of Education or the superintendent's office saying that we were all going to be sent 20 miles out versus the 1 mile that we were going in a distance to our current schools. And as a single parent, a lot of the parents didn't have any vehicles, so it was really difficult for them to get to us when we were sick or when the nurse office called or when they needed parents to come up because they didn't have vehicles. So a lot of times I remember when I would be sick, I would have to spend the day, in the nurse's office and then put back on the bus that evening and just, because there was no way for our parents to get there. When you look at the statistics of Columbus, Georgia, or Muskogee County, 46% of the population is African American. And when you grow up like that, it's easy to feel as though there is a level playing field and that everybody's the same. For example, we normalized a lot of things that appeared to no longer be normal once we were out of that environment. So we didn't know that having your electricity turned off 2 days before payday, we didn't know that that was not normal because our friends down the road, they were experiencing the same thing. So it's like no one was any different than the other. Our parents did pretty much the same jobs as the other. Our socioeconomic statuses were pretty much the same as everyone when you look around. And so for a young kid, what this does is it just kind of preserves that hope inside of you and that belief inside of you that, there is still no limit to what I can accomplish if I just go a little bit further than, what I see in front of me. It's hard for me to say this is where I grew up because we only stayed here for about 5 years, but we never started here. We started in normal apartments and normal places. But, hard times, mom had to do what was best for her. And so then we ended up coming here. Because of the 30-year drawn-out battle, busing took place several times throughout several years, throughout several decades in Columbus, Georgia. Through busing, a lot of the African-American children were shipped to predominantly white schools. A lot of the white teachers who worked in the predominantly white schools through this process were also reassigned to black schools and were given a certain time frame to serve before they were able to put in transfers back to the schools of their choice. And in my opinion, I think there was a lot of preparation that needed to take place prior, maybe in the form of education and training, but I don't think any of us was prepared for what was to come next. remember the first time I stepped in class in third grade. It was a beautiful campus, beautiful classrooms. Definitely, you could tell that a lot of the students who were not familiar with that type of setting were a little bit uncertain of what to expect. And as well as the teachers, because I don't think any of us received a manual to teach you how, if you are an African American student, how to adjust in this new environment. And then if you are a teacher, whether you were an African American teacher that was reassigned to an all-white classroom and also a white teacher that might have been reassigned to an all-black classroom, everybody was in from unfamiliar territory. So no one really knew what to do, but just to continue to do it the way they always have. The problem with that is now you have a mixture of different cultures and a mixture of different learning styles that are sitting in front of you. So if you don't make the necessary adjustments, how can everybody keep up? And the hardest part for me about that third grade year is that I went from being an honor roll student, making A's and B's, sometimes even straight A's, to earning my first F on my report card that year. And actually I had 3 F's. And so I remember going home, and I remember I would just say I got spoken to about the failure to meet satisfactory progress. And I did feel like, something was wrong with me. Like I wasn't smart anymore. But little did I know that this thing that was taking place, it was bigger than even myself. When you think about learning styles, and I've been able to write papers on this during my master's degree program, there was some research done, and I won't go deep into it, prior to me years ago. And this young lady, and she was a Caucasian woman, and she did research on African Americans, research on Europeans, and I wish I knew this lady's name. And what she did is she did a brain study to see which side of the brain was more dominant in each area. And so for African Americans, she recorded that African Americans are right brain cognitive. And what that means is we learn through creative styles. So through photos and through pictures, in terms of music, the right brain processes the melody versus the actual playing of an instrument. And she also found that Europeans were left brain cognitive. And with the left brain, that's considered more of a learning style by object or by logic. So when you think of charts and graphs and grammar, and it's so strange to think about this in that kind of way, because I started thinking about the pyramids in Egypt and how when you view the documentaries about Egypt, you see all of the depictions drawn out. And while we kind of overlook that, when you think about the way they learn, again, right brain cognitive, creative, that's the creative side of the brain, and you learn by storytelling or rhythm and rhyme. That you see on the pyramid, that's a full story. Some of that is years and years of ancient history that's written there just through a picture. We just don't know how to read it. A perfect example of what took place is, again, you have all of these different cultures now mixed into one room without the knowledge of the culture itself. And so for African American students, some of the things that we consider cultural learning ended up being disruption to our new teachers. And I'll give you an example. Some of the young boys would beat on the desk, and they would make a song that taught them their multiplication systems, or taught them how to spell words or learn states. And they would beat on the desk and they would make this beat, and then they would come up with it. And that's how they remembered their vocabulary word, or their 50 states, or the multiplication system. But to our teachers who really didn't understand our culture, this was considered disruption. And a lot of our young African American boys were sent to the office, not really understanding why, but eventually adopting it as disruption. But again, you see this today. I remember the only reason why I was able to learn the Mississippi song, and I think they do this now in all schools, regardless of race or color, but you get the M-I, cricket letter, I, cricket letter, I, humpback, I. So that's how a lot of the African American students would learn. And even now it's funny, because when you're in an African American household and when they're sitting down and they're trying to do math, which is a left brain, it's more left brain. Math is more processed by left brain. We're right brain. So when they're doing their math, you would often hear parents say, I better not hear you sing not one more rap song, because you know these rap songs, but you can't get this math. But that's why. In the beginning of my third grade experience, and even up through the end, I did lose my confidence in myself. And I did lose my belief in myself and my abilities. It was easy for me to look around, and especially at my grades, and that being that young, I didn't understand why, my grades weren't what they were before. But I loved what Reverend Wright said in one of his videos. Reverend Wright is a pastor, I believe, up north, and he said this. He said, in a study he did on black and whites and the way we learn, and he wanted to send a message to a lot of the African Americans to say, we're not deficient, we're just different. And so we're just different in the way that we learn. We're different in our skin color. We're different in the way we express our culture. We're different in the way that we walk, in the way that we talk, in the way that we dress, and the music that we create. And no one's better than the other. We're just different. And so it would take years after that, years before I would regain that confidence in myself as a person, as an African American woman, and to know that, the ability and the potential is within me. It's just that I have to work to really pull it out of myself. I remember a lot of the little girls would come up to a lot of us young black girls, and they would say, oh, can I touch your hair? And that's another way that I knew, okay, I'm really different. Okay, I'm different. I didn't know that my hair was a thing to be touched or to be excited to even feel, but that was definitely an experience. And even though that could have been a teaching moment for our teachers, they didn't really know what to do. A lot of us didn't really know what to do at that point. So as the young girls were trying to touch our hair, the teacher would just kind of, try to get class back in order and just tell everybody to get back in their seats. And so that was definitely, something different. And so you find yourself in the midst of a classroom that's mixed of all types of skin and all types of cultures. And so by the end of that year, we were sent back to, that next school year, we were sent back to our original schools, which were the all African American schools. I guess, the trial was over. And so when you get back to those schools and the African American students who weren't sent out or bused, now you have a conflict, because You've learned to adjust to your new environment. Your teacher taught you to speak differently, as we call proper English. And so when you're thrust back there, now you have a conflict with your fellow African American students, because anything or any behavior outside of pro-blackness was called acting white. And so for a young kid, it just kind of really confuses you, because then you go on this never-ending journey of searching for, okay, what should I be? I don't know what to be. I know I'm black. I know I'm not changing that. That's not changing. But how am I to exist in a world that sees black and white? Literally. It was almost as if your skin dictated who you should be instead of your morals and your values. It wasn't until my adult years when I went back to college and I earned my degree, and I ran into one of the most profound professors I will ever know and remember in my entire life. And this professor challenged me to find out who I was. And by this time, I was 29 going on 30, and so I thought I knew who I was. And he really challenged me to define myself without attaching a title to it. And I couldn't do it. And so for the next 8 years, I went on a journey searching for who I was. And it was at that moment that my confidence and my belief in myself began to restore itself, based on me not knowing who I was and me looking around the world, comparing myself to what I was never intended to be, because I can only be me, and I can only be in my skin. Would I do it again? Yes. You know, no one asks to be born in the skin that they're in. I don't think any of us had a choice, you know, when we were sent to earth. And if we did have a choice, I can only wonder what everyone's option for the color of their skin would be. But because we can't choose the skin that we're born in, I think that that's all the more reason why we should not judge each other for the skin that we're in. You know, the beauty about this story is that I don't regret anything in my life. I don't regret my past. I feel like I learned a lot through my struggles. And it was a struggle, you know. I had the best parents a person could ever have. My mother was a great mother. She did all she can. She worked really hard to make sure she could provide for us. And even when my dad gave his life to Christ, and he was in our lives, and he's an amazing spiritual father, you know, to me. But I don't regret anything in the past. I'm actually grateful for the path that I was sent down, because it made me who I am now. It's given me strength. It's given me courage. It's taught me how to persevere. It's taught me how to never give up. It's taught me how to strive to really believe in myself and my own capabilities. It's taught me how to not compare myself to anyone around me. It's taught me how to not measure myself by what someone else is doing, because each of us have our own identity. There is no one person that is exactly like you and that will be exactly like you. So, you know, that was something that I had to learn. Skin, no skin. Now, if I did have to do it over, I probably would ask God if he could just give me a little bit more of a head start, because when you start all the way from the bottom, it is really a tough climb. And I'm still climbing, and I'm not going to stop climbing. But, you know, I just hope that you enjoyed my journey of the first time that I realized that my skin was different, because it wasn't automatically, you know, from birth. And Just as Reverend Wright said, because your skin is different, you're not deficient. You're just different. So if we can start telling ourselves that, believe in that, then we can understand that there is so much potential within us. We just have to reveal it. So as we end, I would like to thank you for tuning in to hear my story. And I want to remind you that you can only be who you are, and you can only be in your skin. So love the skin that you're in.